All right, everyone. As somebody once said, it's 1 a.m. and I'm not tired. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We bring you the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. You guys know that already. If you're on board right now at 1 a.m., you know what we do here. You know what I'm all about. We deliver the best in content for you, the hardcore smart fan. I decided a few minutes ago, as I was continuing to produce and post videos of my schedule rankings, in which I have now created videos for all the schedules up to number 20. Schedule number 25 will be posted in the morning. Then I've got to post the rest of them, of course. I thought, I haven't talked to the folks in a while. Let's do a call-in show. So the number is 860-325-3687. 860-325-3687. I'll leave the number in the chat in just a second. I want to remind everyone, and I keep beating all of you on the head about this constantly because I know people out there shop on Amazon, and we have set up a link in which you can go into Amazon using the link that we've provided, and you're going to see a product there. Forget the product. Just do your regular Amazon shopping using that product. I'll get to the call in just a second. Go to the Amazon link down in the description section below, and it's in the description section of any of the videos. So go to Amazon using that link, and you help support the channel. It's easy as that. You don't have to spend an extra penny. It costs you nothing. You don't have to buy anything. Well, you do have to do some shopping and eventually buy something. So you can help out the voice of college football and help us grow and produce better than ever, and help us do this the way we want to do it. So if we're delivering the best right now or close to it, and I'm trying to think if anybody does it better. No, I can't think of anybody. So we do it the best, but we're going to do it so much better than that if we get the proper support. So thank you so much for all of you who like the videos, comment, subscribe, share the videos. So sharing the videos, that gets understated. But share the videos if you like a particular video or are interested or intrigued, and I'll get to the calls in just a second. Then share the videos out on social media. So most of you people are on Instagram, you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, and who knows what else. Well, you've got people that follow you and people that you talk to each and every day that know nothing about me. So please let them know that we're right here and we're going to get you set for the 2019 season. Also, if you know people that listen to the audio, I really don't publicize the audio. I don't tweet it out. I don't put it on Facebook, but it's starting to gain some ground. We've been, over the past few weeks, gaining as many as 300 listens per day. We're on all the major audio platforms that I know of: Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, iTunes. So you can catch us right there. You just go to any of those platforms and search Mark Rogers TV, and you can pick us up there. Also, I don't know how many people are watching right now. I don't know how many people are watching right now. I will get to the live chat and get to the calls in just a second. But I would have no idea. I have really simply no idea why you would not join our Voice of College Football community. What I'm going to deliver twice every week, and I still have to do so for this week, this weekend, going into next week, but I have delivered each and every week for about 4 to 5 weeks now, is an exclusive live stream each and every week where I take the comments that you guys have provided, and I'm very, very thankful for 40,000 plus comments. I've lost track. I've not looked it up in quite some time, the metrics, for a few weeks, but over 40,000, well over 40,000 comments to the channel thus far this year in 2019. But I respond to those comments. You get my unfiltered reaction to those comments on our Voice of College Football community. That's one exclusive live stream each and every week. So once we start to churn some traffic there, you'll not only get to listen and see my response and my reaction to your comments on YouTube, but I'll also have the live chat working, so I will be able to respond to your response to my response. And then the other exclusive live stream each and every week is I bring you on here to talk college football. So I've done that with Deep Barat. And also we had a conversation with Brent Beard. He's a professional, but the reason he was allowed to come on for that particular live stream and talk college football is nothing to do with his status in the industry as a radio guy and a television sports anchor for First Coast News, and I forget the name of the other show that Brent hosts, but College Sports Now, College Sports Today. But anyway, Brent joined us a couple weeks ago live because he's joined the Voice of College Football community. So just like you, my aim and my vision is to bring on 3 or 4 of you as a roundtable discussion each and every week, most likely on a Friday. Or I think what is going to be beautiful is we're going to do this each and every Saturday morning before the games from, let's say, 10 to noon. From 10 to noon every Saturday leading into the noon Eastern time games. Bring you guys on. We'll have 3 or 4 of you. And then if we've got like 50 of you that want to be on, we'll rotate you. We'll bring on 3 or 4 for 5 or 10 minutes and then have 3 or 4 more of you come on for the next 10 or 15 minutes and on and on and on. And that's what we're going to do. So what you need to do to be part of that is to join the Voice of College Football community. All right. The link is right below in the description section. And I am going to hammer away at that because that is so vital and critical and crucial to our success. And it's just a great offering for you. Forget what it benefits me, because by extension, actually, if you think about it, if it benefits me, it's going to benefit you because it keeps us going here. All right. Go ahead and call. It's 860-325-3687. Also want to let you know that the Super Chat's on. The Super Chat's on. That's another way in which you can contribute. Like the videos, comment, share, subscribe, Super Chat, Amazon, Voice of College Football community. I know that's a long list. I know. Let's get to the calls. All right. It's Mark Rogers TV, the Voice of College Football. It's been so long since I've done this. I forgot to do the press the 1. Mark Rogers TV is the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Yo, Mark, it's your homeboy, Deep Barat. How's it going, man?
I don't have any homeboys, but if you'd like to designate yourself as such, then that's fine. We'll do that. That's fine. As you can imagine, Deep Barat, I don't think that it would be difficult for you to imagine that I've never used the term homeboy in my life, but sure, you're a good guy. I enjoy the conversation each and every time. We'll phrase it that way. And of course, we had a conversation a few weeks ago that I was just highlighting. I don't know if you heard, but highlighting in my intro.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, dude, it's been a little bit of a slow-ish off season, but there's some very, I mean, obviously you're a generic college football follower and you follow all the conferences, but especially in the Big 12, there's been
generic. What was that the term that you used?
Yeah, I think you're pretty neutral, like in your
okay.
analysis.
I get your point. I'm just kidding. I get your point. It just didn't seem too flattering.
Yeah.
Go ahead to your point.
Dude. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, you know, from my end, like I'm a diehard Texas fan, like all football in particular is what I closely follow. And you know, man, I'm not necessarily saying I'm worried or the future is a little bit ominous, because I think it's going to be a very closely fought conference between Texas and Oklahoma, at least in the next few years. But I mean, Oklahoma not only just landed the number 1 quarterback in 2019, Spencer Rattler, but in 2021, they landed the number 1 quarterback according to Rivals, number 1 quarterback and number 1 recruit. So there's like 2 back-to-back number 1 quarterbacks that Oklahoma has landed. I believe this kid is out of Georgia, Brock Vandegrift or something like that. So, you know, I don't want to say I'm a little nervous or I'm a little worried about the future of Texas against Oklahoma. But obviously, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma created this reputation in which, your QBU, your back-to-back Class 2 quarterbacks have been number one in the draft and Heisman winners. And so that's all of a sudden creating this reputation among the very best and brightest quarterback recruits in the country. And Oklahoma is obviously the place to go to play college football. Now, from Texas's perspective, it's not that ominous of news. I mean, as much as I would like to, bite my lip and say that, I mean, we still are getting some very high class 4-star and 5-star QBs coming in the line, in the pipeline, including in the class of 2021, possibly Preston Stone, who's also, one of the more marquee quarterback recruits in that class. But yeah, man, I just wanted to kind of hear your perspective on that. I mean, it is very, and again, I'm not also, I mean, OU doesn't have a defense too. I mean, they are 129th in the country, but at least from an offensive perspective, things are looking a little bit ominous right now with the way Oklahoma has been recruiting offensively, particularly quarterbacks and wide receivers.
Well, possibly ominous for Texas, but for the rest of us across the country who would like to see a competitive Big 12, a la in the old days, Ohio State, Michigan, more recently in the SEC, Alabama, Georgia, what we saw at one point with Clemson and Florida State, kind of a major two, a college football playoff caliber two that fight and scratch and claw with a marquee matchup near the end of the season. And of course, for Oklahoma and Texas, that's typically the first week of October, but then a rematch in the Big 12 championship game that is not simply Oklahoma stomping over somebody as they have, well, in place of the Big 12 championship game for the last several years. It's just been Oklahoma running away with the Big 12 most seasons, where it's nice to see. I don't think that you have major concerns about your particular program. You seem to be concerned that Oklahoma continues to match you, or maybe at that particular position surpass you and continue to keep a reputation in which Lincoln Riley has of molding and developing quarterbacks for the next level. And so that gives him a bit of an advantage going into a highly touted quarterback's living room to say, I'm the quarterback whisperer. We run an offense that is very, very conducive to big numbers, Heisman trophies, and NFL status, back-to-back number one selections. So that's difficult to argue in regards to the recent success at that particular position. Therefore, going out to recruit and saying, facts are facts. Look at what we produce. Look at what we can do for you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of touch an important point on that is that, OU is great, right, in terms of offensive play and offensive scoring. They were the number one offense in the country last year, but their Achilles heel is defense, right? They had 129th ranked defense. They fired two defensive coordinators in 1 year. Not only did they fire Stoops, but they fired the interim guy as well, and they brought in this guy, Alex Grinch, who used to be the co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State. So, I think that it is a little bit ominous, the fact that, you land two number one QBs, not only in the class of 2019, as you saw, but 2021. So essentially what they want to do is create a system in which the interim QB, the guy who comes in immediately, not interim, but redshirt QB comes in immediately, redshirts for 1 year as a freshman. The expectation is that Rattler would be in the NFL after 3 years at OU, so he would take over, the job, after 1 year of redshirting. So, and the same thing is happening with even Spencer Rattler this year. A lot of people have Oklahoma, the starting QB there as Jalen Hurts. So, again, as a Texas fan, I'm not saying that it is ominous overall, but it is a little bit of a cause of concern from us, from our end, that, quarterback recruiting in particular for Oklahoma is like peanuts. I mean, they pretty much can get anyone they want whenever they're looking for one. I mean, they haven't gotten a QB in 2020, but I don't think that they're necessarily even looking for one. And, kids aren't stupid. I mean, they realize they have to play in the system underneath a quarterback for a year or two or several years, and they don't want to do that. They'd rather have a starting job somewhere else where they can, get some snaps and try to get into the NFL.
Well, so, as it pertains to 2019, you're facing the worst quarterback that you've seen at Oklahoma since 2014. So at least there is no way that Jalen Hurts.
The expectation, right? But Hurts has won a national championship before. He has the experience. So, I mean, people say that he's not as good, but who knows how he will be on the actual field, right?
We're giving him the 2017 national championship.
I mean, didn't he win it as a starting quarterback?
He left the game losing by 13 points.
That was 2 others, right?
So anyway, regardless, yes, your point's taken. I'm not going to nitpick your point. Your point is on point, regardless of he walked off the field with a lead against Clemson and could have won that game the season before. So yes, of course, it's all speculation to a certain extent. Looking at 2019 right now, this is all projection, but I cannot imagine that Jalen Hurts is going to turn in the season that Kyler Murray nor the seasons that Baker Mayfield did at Oklahoma. Is he going to be prolific, depending on how you define that word? Yes, he's going to run for a ton of touchdowns. Let's say off the top of my head, he's going to throw 30 or 32 touchdowns, and he's going to run for 12 to 15. He's going to produce a lot of points, but I think that they are taking a step back. He cannot make the throws that those two kids made. He is not as dynamic of a playmaker as Baker, and he's not as dynamic of a runner as Kyler Murray. He's very capable. He's one of the 20 best quarterbacks in the country, but he is not one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the country, and that's what they've had for the last 4 seasons.
Yeah, very much so. And I'd like to add a very important point on that is that Oklahoma also loses their entire offensive line.
Yep.
And they also lose Marquise Brown, who was their key wide receiver last year. I mean, they still have CeeDee Lamb and they're talented on wide receiver. But I do believe that, especially as a diehard Texas fan, this is the year for Texas.
Okay, this is your closing line. I've got plenty of calls coming in.
Absolutely.
I'm counting you down.
On this note, people say that Texas is back, right? For Texas to really be back, this is the golden opportunity, the best year they've had in a while in terms of a chance, I think, in 2019 with Ellinger, Colin Johnson, and several other marquee seniors on offense and defense. So if there's any year that Texas is back, it's going to have to be 2019.
Thanks, Deeper Rod.
That's all I have to say.
All right, Deeper Rod calling, talking Texas football. Okay, I probably got about, I don't know how, 5 or 6, 7, 8 phone calls during that time. So I'm going to do my best to try to limit the time duration on the phone calls. That went about 10 minutes. That's probably too long. All right. Thought we had a call coming in. I started to answer it. Please call back. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And thank you so much, DeAndre and Swamp Tiger. So I hate to say anything about money on this platform. Believe me, if you really knew me, I hate to say anything about money, but we're trying to build something here. And this is the kind of contribution that I think is amazing, because basically my thought process here, I'm trying to end it and accept, and it's not letting me. Keep trying to call. I had 2 calls exactly at the same time, and I was ending and accepting, and I was holding and accepting, and it didn't do either one for me. The point that I'm making here is that I respect the heck out of your time, for you to take the time to watch me, to interact, the consideration that you take when you could watch a zillion other people to watch what we do here. I appreciate. This phone is having some issues tonight. What? DeAndre, how you doing? The problem is I can't get the screen on that's going to put the speaker on. So I can hear you, but nobody else can hear you because the speaker's not on and the screen for the speaker's not on. Oh boy. Yeah, I got no other way to pull you up here. Yeah, can't get the.
The call will start at the beep.
Hello, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Hopefully, this is DeAndre because I just cut him off.
No, this is Anthony.
Anthony, how you doing? DeAndre, I apologize. Please call back. The phone is acting up. All right, Anthony, thanks so much for calling. What's going on tonight?
I have a question, actually, Mark. Since you've been covering college football most of your life, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Let's see. That would have started in 1990. You're right about that.
Like college campuses to go tailgate at, like that you have traveled to.
Okay, so my background is I'm from Ohio. My first job in television was at a very small station in Ashland, Ohio, but I was a play-by-play announcer for Division III football and basketball at Ashland University and high school football. So I didn't do a whole lot of tailgating at the major schools, but I took a couple trips to Columbus at Ohio State. Okay, past that, I then went to SEC country and covered the SEC, most notably at Alabama, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. I did get on the road to a lot of bowl venues, but most of the time, my time was spent at one of those three schools. I also went to Tennessee at one point. All right. Since then, basically, I've been, as many of you know, working at ESPN for the last 18 years, but I'm here in Bristol, so I'm not traveling out to college football venues. So out of all those experiences, which isn't a ton, considering how long I've been doing it, just because I've been in-house most of that time. I think the most unique experience, and I think this is backed up from people that have a much more extensive experience in going across the country and partaking of this, is the Grove in Oxford at Ole Miss.
I hear from people that Alabama, the tailgates in Alabama and Auburn, these are pretty close to each other, get crazy.
Well, certainly when you're just talking about masses of people and the importance of the games factored in, then of course that would be one of the prime destinations.
I've never been to games, but my friends have been to Florida State games.
Yep.
And they say those are pretty crazy.
Sure.
And people who have friends who are from up north as well. They've been to Ohio State, Michigan games and Michigan Notre Dame games, and they see those games even are the atmosphere is crazy and stuff like that.
So, Anthony, where have you been? What all stadiums have you traveled to?
Myself, I've been to pro football games. To be honest, I went to a Dolphins game. I've never been to the Orange Bowl before. By the time I got into high school, the Orange Bowl was already shutting down, and they were what was it called? They were switching it over. They were selling that land to the Marlins to build their stadium. So I haven't been able to go to any college football games and stuff like that, and to travel crazy and stuff. So, and I've been to I went to a UM basketball game once when I was little and stuff.
So we're preparing this year to go to the Week 0 game between Miami and Florida, which is, of course, not on campus. It's going to be in Orlando. So that's going to be a different experience. It's not as raucous as you would have on campus, but that should be an interesting experience.
What I don't get. Can you explain that? Why do they do neutral site games for Florida and Georgia, and this game for Miami and what is it called? Miami and Florida. Why doesn't Florida just come down here to prove the point that they can beat Miami in their home stadium, or we go up there to Florida and try to beat them at their own stadium like we do with Florida State every year?
I know that I
Stuff like
saw a
that.
post recently that there's talk that Georgia and Florida are going to go to a home and home series like everybody else in the SEC and stop playing at a neutral site in Jacksonville and go home and home, or maybe every 3 years go home and then a neutral site at another venue. That's a great question.
And that's what I'm hearing with the games. I think with the games that the what's it called? The Hurricanes are going to be doing with the SEC are going to be home at home. I think we play Alabama, we play Texas A&M, and I think they're home and home games as well. Are those neutral site games?
When you say we, who's we?
Miami.
Miami.
Like,
Oh, you're talking about in the
yeah,
future, you play Alabama and you play Texas A&M.
Yeah,
Off the top of my head, I know the Alabama game's a neutral site game.
How about the Texas A&M? I think that was a home at home.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. I think Michigan State's a home and home, and Texas A&M probably is, but I don't have the schedule in front of me. It's money related. In regards to all these neutral site games in Atlanta and in Houston in particular, those are the two sites that have basically had all the neutral site games in recent years. Over the last 10 to 15 years have been in Houston, where we've seen Alabama play Wisconsin and Wisconsin LSU and Ole Miss and Houston and Ole Miss and Texas Tech and all sorts of games like that. And then the Atlanta site has always been an SEC ACC battle, which has been, well, not so much a battle. It's going to be Alabama and Duke this year, and it was Alabama Louisville last year. And now they've added this game in Orlando as well. So it comes down to money. Now, I can't give you the specifics of why they make more money in those venues. I think it has to do with sponsorships. But that's what
and the bigger
it's happened.
Probably too.
Well, I don't know if they're bigger stadiums, because most of those places are professional stadiums, which aren't as big as playing in Death Valley with 95,000 people or Tuscaloosa with over 100,000. Those NFL, sure. But yeah, but I'm talking about the teams that have participated in those year after year after year. And that's been LSU and that's been Alabama, where their stadiums are pushing or exceeding 100,000, and those NFL stadiums are more in the 75 to 80,000 range. I think it has to do with sponsorships and selling luxury lodges.
And
that would be my guess.
It's the money aspect
yes.
of it that has to do with these neutral sites. It's not that the teams are afraid to go to each other's stadium to play. It's the money aspect from the NCAA that's doing that. That's selecting these neutral site games, basically.
Yeah, so we've got Vodka Drinker on the line saying that timeshare units for rent. So I don't know how that factors into it. I certainly think that could well be the case, and I'm not going to either confirm or deny that. I have no idea, but I know that it has to do with money.
Call, Mark. I know you have other calls on the line.
I appreciate that, Anthony. Thank you so much, sir. Have a great night. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, and I'll put the number in the live chat. And I apologize for anybody who has called and not been able to get through. And I know that's DeAndre in particular. So what we have here is we got 2 new cameras that I've recently purchased with new setup there and other paraphernalia here. And well, it's too far to reach. Tripods and mic crane. All right, let's get to this call and hope it's a good one. So this is exactly what happened. As soon as I was ready to hit the 1, which activates the call, somebody else called at the same time. So now I got 3 people calling at the same time. Oh my goodness, what a nightmare. I'm having a problem with my phone tonight. So I know you guys don't care how this process works, but the reason it's not working is because I need the speakerphone on, and I also need to hit the number 1 Well, why this is happening tonight, and it's never happened before, is as soon as I hit the 1, the screen goes away where I can't hit the speaker, or if I hit the speaker first, then the numbers go away where I can't hit the number 1 to activate the call. Crazy. That's because I've got multiple people calling at the same time. That's part of it. All right. I'm taking one of two. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
What's up, Mark? How you doing, man?
There he is. How are you?
I'm doing good. Hey, let me ask you this. I'll make it quick. Clemson in the middle linebacker position. Why is Clemson having so much trouble producing middle linebackers and a left tackle in the NFL? I know Goodson went a couple of years ago, but I wonder why they're having so much trouble with it.
That's an interesting question because I never really contemplated that, but because with a recent success there at just about every position, the linebacking crew, certainly they haven't had a bad position. You can't win national championships and have a lousy position, but they haven't been elite at linebacker. They've had some guys stand out like a Trey Lamar. Most recently, but yeah, the linebacking core hasn't been stout. I think it comes with a philosophy that the recruiting emphasis has been decidedly up front, getting those rush ends and getting those run stuffers in the middle, and then getting elite secondary play. But yeah, that's a great question. I'm not able to answer that one. I just think any football program is going to be relatively weak somewhere. You can't be elite across the board.
Okay.
I just think it's difficult to recruit elite at every position every year. That's a difficult standard.
I know Goodson starts for the Giants.
Yep.
Bullware, I try to tell people, I don't think Bullware was a 4-star. I think he was more like a 3 or 2 star, if that. I mean, I know some people argue Bullware. I know he played more of an outside linebacker position than a middle linebacker. But Mitch Hyatt was another one that surprised because I think you would know this more than I do, but because he was highly recruited out of Ohio. Ohio State had one of them too. Urban Meyer went there, and I guess he pulled his Mitch Hyatt started 4 years, and I know he has some issues against Alabama, but I'm kind of shocked that he didn't get drafted.
Well, even though there are roughly 256 players that get drafted in the NFL draft, I think we all are a bit surprised at the end of the draft to see how many really good players didn't get drafted. There were in upwards of 40 underclassmen. Can you imagine underclassmen who had the scouting combine grade and the information that the NFL now provides on scouting reports that should give the kids indication on whether they should come out, and still 40 of them came out and didn't get drafted. So there's still a problem there. I've got the numbers here on Ben Boulware. So he was the 7th rated inside linebacker in the country out of Anderson, South Carolina. And he was the 3rd ranked player in South Carolina. And he was rated by the 247 composite as a 4-star.
Oh, for real? I'm shocked. But hey, that goes to show you. I know he was behind Anthony. That's another question now. Georgia, Clemson, who has more active NFL players at this current time?
Okay, let's see. You're going to cause me to look that one up, and I will, whether it be on during the show or afterwards.
Clemson had more. But I thought Galoo said that Georgia, only 3 schools had more than Clemson. I know Bama has probably the most. I want to say LSU, and I want to say Florida and Miami is up there too.
You think Florida and Miami have more current NFL players than Ohio State does?
Oh, no, Ohio State. Definitely not Ohio State. I should have mentioned them.
Boy, Georgia and it's got to be so close that it doesn't matter. I don't think that either fan base would have bragging rights because they've got 43 and the other one has 41. But I actually went through every team in the Power 5 last year, and it just took me too long, but I really wanted to do it. And I counted up the number of NFL players for every school in the Power 5, and I started to do a series because I thought it was pretty interesting. But people didn't find it interesting, so I stopped doing it. And I don't remember what the numbers were, but obviously that would be a year off, but it would still be close. And those two teams were very close to the top, but I don't remember what the numbers were. Clemson certainly has, I would argue off the top of my head, has better players in the NFL right now than Georgia does.
Oh, okay.
Don't you think so?
Yeah, I thought at the running back position, but I would say Clemson got them at the receiver position.
Yeah, who are outstanding players in the NFL right now out of both schools? Well, Clemson, has the wide receivers like Sammy Watkins and Martavis Bryant and DeAndre Hopkins, and the
Humphreys out of Tampa Bay.
Who's at Tampa Bay?
Humphreys, he signed
a
free agent contract.
Okay, well, there you go.
We don't ever talk. Yeah.
And you've got the defensive line position with the two guys at Atlanta, Grady Jarrett, Shaq Lawson's having a nice career. Of course, Deshaun Watson's exceptional. Versus Georgia, past the running back position, which is extremely stellar with Sony Michel, Todd Gurley, and Nick Chubb. What do we have? We've got, of course, AJ Green, and people are going to start spitting out names, I'm sure, in the live chat. We got Vic Beasley. Yes, I already mentioned him by extension with Grady Jarrett from Clemson. Georgia, other outstanding Georgia players currently in the NFL. Well, of course, you got Roquan Smith with the Bears, and you've got
Gurley, Chubb, and
I mentioned those three guys. So anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole deal, but let's see who else anybody comes up with. I don't see anybody else in the live chat with Georgia and Clemson players. But my rough estimation, without digging into it, is that I don't know who has more players. I think it's very close, but Clemson currently has more impact players in the NFL than Georgia.
Yeah. And I have one last question.
Yep.
I was doing one of my rides. In 1994, Nebraska won the national championship. Did Penn State tie with them for the national championship?
No. Both polls voted for Nebraska.
So that was the first year that Penn State was in Big Ten?
That was their second year in the Big Ten.
I wonder why Penn State didn't get it, whether it was a weak schedule or...
Well, what happened that particular year was Penn State was number one in at least one of the polls for most of the season, if not both of the polls, but definitely one of the polls. And there was a late season game that they played at Illinois, which Illinois was decent then. They made a bowl game, but they weren't great. They had Simeon Rice. They had Kevin Hardy. They had some really good defensive players. They were a good team. They went to a bowl game. They were decent, but they weren't. They were outside the top 25. Penn State went there and went down like 21-0 before you could blink. And they had to come all the way back and win a game like 35-29. And that dropped them to number 2 in the polls, and they never recovered. Now, to be fair, if everyone could get together and just say, okay, what's fair here? Well, they're both playing it. Actually, Penn State probably played in the better conference at the time, but it was close. It wasn't decidedly better. But would have gotten together and say, both of these teams went 12-0. Penn State just won the Rose Bowl by 18 points over Oregon, and Nebraska won its bowl game over Miami. So both teams should be rewarded with a national championship under this system. But of course, they don't do that. So everybody just votes for what they want. And Nebraska won both polls. If I'm Penn State, and they probably have done this, I raise a national championship banner at our stadium because we're Penn State. We play in the Big Ten, which was arguably the best conference in the country. Not definitely, but it was in the argument. What else can we do? Hang the banner. You're 12-0.
Right. Okay.
But that was not a
it,
split.
Mark, man. You have a good night. I keep listening to the show.
Thank you, DeAndre. I appreciate it. You have a great night, and thank you so much for the support.
Yes, sir.
It was DeAndre on the line. Vodka drinker. Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. I cannot in any way explain or describe the appreciation I have, because I know that this comes from a place for most of you where, you know, these are resources that are important. So thank you so much for, oh, we've got two coming in at the same time again. So I apologize for whoever is getting cut off. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, how you doing, Mark? This is Sean from Huntsville, Alabama, man.
Hey, Sean, how are you?
Doing well. That's me down in the comments. Rashawn Bourne. That's me down there. You probably see me on a lot of your comments.
I apologize. I think I messed up your name the first time I heard it there. I had another call coming in. I got all sorts of beeps and static and so forth.
Yeah.
So this is Rashad. Thank you so much for commenting many times here recently. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. I love to mix it up with the other fans, man. Have a good time. Try to support your channel any way we can.
What you got on your mind? Sure.
Yeah, I just had two quick things, man. You had spoke on the kids that didn't get drafted, the underclassmen. I played college ball myself here in Alabama at HBCU. Fortunate enough to coach it right now.
Nice.
That's exactly what Coach Saban was referring to. Everybody kind of jumped down his throat because he called Ronnie Brown out without saying Ronnie's name. But people should listen to what he said. I've been through that myself. If you have a grade and it's not a first round grade, you really, really, really should think about coming back to school if you really, really, really want to play pro ball, and that's really, really, really what you want to do at the highest level. All he was saying was, sure, if you get drafted, your grade is a third rounder or a fourth rounder or even a fifth rounder. If you want to go ahead and go, that's fine. That's fine. If you can make it to your next contract, so be it. Otherwise, come back to school. You'll be tops at your position. It's a difference in making what, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 and about $5.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no possibility, it's no guarantee that you will get drafted. No guarantee. Once you start passing that fourth round mark, it's no guarantee, man. It's no guarantee. You really, really, really playing with yourself after that. So that's all he was saying. He was just trying to tell the kids, don't be so quick to take the first carrot that they dangle in front of your face. Don't be so quick. If you have to, so be it. Chase your dreams. Nobody's upset with you. People took it as he was being, belligerent with Ronnie Brown, but at the same time, man, he had 3 or 4 kids, Xavier McKinney, all on the bench, ready to play. It wasn't about the player as far as staying here. We had 3 or 4 more other people just as talented. He was just trying to say, all these kids across, not just Alabama kids, but all across the country, stop hopping at these NFL so quick unless you know for a fact you have a first round grade, high second round grade, because there's no guarantee that you will make it. It's no guarantee, man. NFL is a totally different game. It's a business, totally different. And one more thing, I had one of my partners down in the comment section that me and him go back and forth a lot. He's been giving me the business here lately, rightfully so. A big shout out to Clemson. Those guys had a very, very great team. I love the rivalry that we have with those guys, man, because honestly, without sounding too boastfully, we hadn't had a rivalry with anybody here lately. So it feels good. It feels good to actually have a team that I can look for. It used to be LSU. That's out the door. 8 years in a row. You can say it's Georgia, but, we're not really worried about Georgia, man. Clemson has really, really, really empowered the Bama fans again, because quite frankly, the Bama fans get mad when I say this, but it's the truth. We hadn't been hungry in a while. We've been full. Bellies are full for a while, man. That loss, that's like a cold glass of water in your face. It'll wake you up, man. Also, and it's not just a football game. It's everything. It's everything. The winning, if you can believe there's a such thing as getting bored with winning, I promise you, we went through it. You had our A-Day games, attendance that was going down. You had, when the call out I go down there all the time. My little cousin play down there. When the players come out, we went from screaming loud to now everybody just clap. 6 years ago, Tuscaloosa was one of the loudest stadiums in the SEC, if not the country. I would dare say Tennessee is louder. Florida is louder. Texas A&M is damn sure louder. You know, it's several states. LSU is louder. So sometimes us fans, we need that L. You need it. You need it to wake you up and make you realize winning is not something that's promised to you. You got to work for that, man. And what I'll say to Alabama haters is this. I've been down there quite a bit. It's more kids stayed on campus this year than I have seen in the last 5 years. I've seen something in our team that I hadn't seen in years, man. They're hungry again. It's not everybody playing around, joking in practice. They are actually at it. I'm talking about at it, fighting in practice. It was crazy. So the schedule sets up nicely. And just like Clemson was hungry at the beginning of last year, when we beat those guys to go on and play Georgia, you better, and the thing that made Christian Miller and all Christian Wilkins and all those guys stay, you better believe Alabama's feeling it right now. And I love it. I love it, man. I love it, Mark. I'm not one of these fans that take the L as a bad thing. You know what I mean? Clemson outplayed us. No excuses. They beat us. It happens, bro. I played college ball. It happens. Sometimes a team prepares for you just a little bit better, and nothing you do works. You know what I mean? It happens. So shout out to Clemson, brother. I appreciate Clemson. I do. Because we will see them again this year. You can believe that, brother.
Well, Rashad, similar to the comment section, you've given me a whole lot to go on here. So the one point that I'll make is that so I try to distinguish when there's a result in college football that I don't think is indicative of the competition between the teams or the quality of the two teams that I think is an aberration. I will make the distinction between, this is my opinion, I believe that these teams, let's say it was a blowout, that I still think that these teams are comparable, but I will make the distinction that it doesn't matter what I think because they did play on the field and Clemson won by 4 touchdowns because that's what matters. But I will still say it's still my opinion that these teams are comparable because I truly believe if they went out there, played 10 times, that Clemson's not going to go out there continuously and beat them by 4 touchdowns. But it doesn't matter. They only got 1 shot, and that was the result of the game. So sometimes people don't.
Done pretty good the year before with Kelly Bryant.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's football, man. It's football. It happens. You know what I mean? That's the great thing about this sport, man. I'm going to go ahead and hang up now, man. I appreciate you taking my call, man. And we will continue to support.
Thanks, Rashad. I appreciate the support. Have a good night.
You too.
My other point I'll make about Alabama's competition in the SEC, to his point, and I believe that the SEC is the best conference in college football. I think it's reestablished itself in the last 2 years. I do think that there was a 3 or 4 year span from about 2014, 15, 16 in that range in which there was an argument. I'm not saying that the SEC was not the best, but I'm not saying that it was the best. I think it was debatable, and it made my schedule rankings, or my conference rankings, I should say, at the end of the season very interesting because there was competition from the Big Ten and the ACC to the SEC's crown as best conference for a few years. But I think the SEC has reestablished itself. The last point I will make to Rashad before I take this call is, to his point, despite Texas A&M being one of the 15 best teams in the country and LSU being one of the 10 best, they couldn't touch Alabama, of course, as we plainly saw, and Mississippi State couldn't score a point like LSU. So Georgia, though, on the other hand, I understand now that the games are over, it's easy to say, well, we beat them, and they've got nothing to brag about because once the result's in, then it doesn't matter what the score was. But those were cliffhangers, and Georgia certainly was toe-to-toe as good as Alabama in those games, and even through 45, 50 minutes of game time were better than Alabama. But to Alabama and Nick Saban's credit, they made the plays under pressure and were poised enough and executed when it mattered. All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hello, how are you doing, sir?
Good. Who am I speaking with? Okay. All right. So at times I question the mental status of some people at 1:51 in the morning, or maybe they're on the West Coast, but regardless of the time of day, that take the time to make a phone call like that and then to follow it up with a response like that is quite interesting. That I certainly value my time More than that, I certainly have better things to do myself, but maybe some people don't.
The call will start at the beep.
It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McGee Sports 4.
What's going on, sir? It's good to hear from you.
Hey, I'm doing great. Yeah. If you're popping in the background, someone's running fireworks. If you just hear popping in the background, just to let you know. But the reason why I'm calling is because I came up with my final mail-in prediction and my final playoff prediction. I want to pass that
Okay.
to you.
Let's just be careful here. Let's be careful here, MTD Sports 4. I just want to make sure it's only June 21st, 22nd. It's only at the last week of June, so you have plenty of time to change your mind or make a revision. So I don't know if you want to state that this is the final.
I'm not saying it's the final.
Oh,
but
I thought that's what you said. It was the final. Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. I have Maryland going 8-4 with a 5-4 conference record.
Okay.
I think we lose to Ohio State, Purdue, Michigan State, and Penn State.
Okay.
I do.
So you will be interested to know that just in the last 15 to 20 minutes prior to doing this call-in show, that I was reviewing the Maryland schedule, and I cut the Maryland schedule ranking, and I was looking at just that, and then I made my record projection, which wasn't extremely off of yours. There was a slight decline in wins, but not a whole lot. I certainly see your point on Maryland coming up. But so in all of that, at the top of my head, I believe you're predicting a win against Nebraska and Michigan.
Correct.
And also
If you look at
Syracuse and Temple.
Correct.
Okay.
If you look at Michigan's schedule, Michigan are coming off playing Penn State on the road and Notre Dame, and then they have Maryland on the road before a bye. That's a big trap game for Michigan. I do trust Urban Meyer more than Jim Harbaugh. I don't think Jim Harbaugh is the type of coach that'll have his guys ready to play that game. I think it's a big trap game. If you look at the Michigan schedule where they get Maryland, that's why I picked Maryland. I think we get them. I think we beat them this year. I have a gut feeling.
So as a Terp fan, how much of a home field advantage do you think that you have in College Park?
It's not like a Georgia. It's not like an SEC home field advantage. I wouldn't say it's one of the best home field advantages, but it's a home field advantage.
Okay. You also have a pretty difficult game against Minnesota. I noticed that the back end of your schedule is really tough.
Yeah, I have us losing to Michigan State on the back end, but
well, before that, as you know, before that you've got Minnesota, Ohio State, Michigan in a row. Then you've got a bye week, and then you finish up Michigan State, Nebraska, Michigan State. So that's 5 difficult games. You do have the open date in there to help out.
Yeah. Well, I'm confident against Minnesota. We beat them the past few years and blew them out last year. We ran them off the field. I'm pretty confident in the Minnesota game personally. Like, to me, I don't see them as much of a threat. So.
Okay. I understand your confidence based on last year's result, and you do have a faster, more athletic team than Minnesota. I don't know if that I would be supremely confident, though.
I mean, I'm just telling you what I'm seeing on the field. I think Minnesota is an overrated team. I think they're only getting hyped up because they beat a few teams in the Big Ten West last season, and the Big Ten West was not really that good last year. And I think they're just getting overhyped, and that offense is getting a bit overhyped. Now, I know we don't have a good defense, so we'll make that offense look good, but the Maryland offense, I think, will light them up.
What do you think Maryland would do in the Big Ten West?
In the Big Ten West, if we were in the Big Ten West, I'll probably say 9-3 if we were in the Big Ten West. I'll give us one more game.
Okay. Anything else on your mind?
My playoff predictions as of right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have for the first seed, I have Clemson, the second seed, Georgia, the third seed, Oklahoma, and the fourth seed, Oregon.
The Big Ten is going to be left out of the playoff again. And so, again, you've got Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Oregon. Okay. I can see that.
No Alabama either.
No Alabama, no Ohio State, or nobody from the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 gets back in. Okay.
Yeah, I think every team in the Big Ten is going to lose at least 2 games when it's all said and done before bowl games.
No, I understand that. I understand what you're saying there. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to predict that, but we'll see. I understand your theory there, your logic. There are 4, 5, 6 teams in the Big Ten. Certainly Ohio State still has the best roster in the conference, but it's with a new quarterback and new coach. And Michigan's certainly close. Penn State's close. And then the Big Ten West is free for all. That's going to be a very interesting race. That's the most interesting race in college football, because to distinguish between Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and to a lesser degree, Minnesota, that's the best race in the country.
Don't forget on Northwestern.
I thought I threw them in, but yes, Northwestern. Sure.
But I just think Alabama's going to lose 2 games this year. I think they lose a game against Texas A&M. I think they lose against Georgia in the SEC championship. And I think Ohio State is going to lose 2 games in the regular season.
Sure. Okay. So they're going to lose Ohio State. Let's see. Well, they do have Wisconsin and Nebraska, and they've got Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State. So they lose 2 of those, I guess.
I have them losing to Penn State and Northwestern, actually.
Oh, that's right. They've got Northwestern. Yeah.
I think they go into Nebraska and beat them.
Okay. That's what most people are talking about as the latest of the trap games for Ohio State, a la Purdue and Iowa.
Yeah. But I don't think they get blown out this year in any of the games. I think they lose 2 close games.
So of course, MCD Sports 4, because of the reputation of the Pac-12 in decline the last few years, it's going to be a couple things are going to be crucial here. Number one, that Oregon beats Auburn. That could be a huge indicator to help Oregon, or by extension, if somebody else beats them and represents the Pac-12 North, it could help a Stanford or a Washington by extension to say, okay, at least Oregon beat Auburn. And that hasn't happened in recent years. Washington lost to an Auburn team that went 3-5 in the SEC, so that's not a good look. And number two, that most likely, if things play out similarly to what we've seen the last few years, Oregon or any Pac-12 winner may have to be 1 game better than another team that they're competing against for a playoff spot.
Well, Mark, let me tell you my theory about the Pac-12 North, and then I'll let you go. I have Washington going 11-1. I have Oregon going 11-1, and I have Washington being Oregon. I have Washington going to the Pac-12 championship and losing to Utah.
Whoa. That's an interesting scenario. I love the scenario, but the problem is you believe that the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is going to select a non-Pac-12 champion to go to the playoff.
Yeah, I think Oregon's going to lose a very tight game to Washington, and I think with Alabama 2 losses against Texas A&M and Georgia, I just think Oregon's going to have the better resume at the end.
Oregon's 11-1. They're at home for the Pac-12 championship game. Alabama's 11-2, and they just lost the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
So if Alabama loses a close SEC championship game to a team that won the SEC and is going to the playoff, you believe that Oregon's going to get selected as a Pac-12 runner-up in their own division?
I think Oregon would have the better resume than Alabama, straight up. Because Cal, Washington State, I know they get USC. I think they get I think they get Arizona State, if I'm not mistaken, and they're going to have that win over Auburn. Washington's non-conference schedule is laughable compared to Oregon's.
Sure. Yeah, they're not competing for a playoff spot against Washington in your scenario. Who's going to win the Pac-12? Washington?
I have Utah winning the Pac-12 against Washington in the Pac-12 championship.
So Oregon is not competing at this point against Washington. They're done. They've lost the Pac-12 championship game. They're not going to the playoff. You raise an interesting scenario. That's a fascinating scenario to compare those two teams under those circumstances. But I have just released my schedule rankings. I'm, of course, in the process, and I believe that Alabama has, despite their awful non-conference scheduling, a better, more difficult schedule than Oregon does.
You think so? I mean, it'll be interesting to see, but I think Alabama. I personally think I think Alabama's going to be in some tight games this year. I see the Texas A&M, the LSU game being kind of tight. I see the Auburn game being tight. I see the Mississippi State and South Carolina game being competitive this year as well. So
yeah, they certainly weren't last year, but I would hope so.
Yeah, I would say the Mississippi State game was competitive last year.
Last year?
Yeah, I would say that. I would call that competitive.
The 24-0 game. The 24-0 game.
That should have been 14-14 at halftime.
It should have been, but it was never 14. It was like 14-0 before we could blink. Alabama took the ball the first two drives and they marched 75 or 80 yards for touchdowns against a really good defense, and Mississippi State could never mount anything on offense. That game was over.
They drove it down the field twice, Mississippi State, and turned it over in like Alabama's territory at like the 10-yard line twice.
Yeah,
that game could have been 14-14.
Yeah, it really wasn't that close. But anyway, regardless, I don't consider that to be a close game. I don't think Alabama played a competitive game. The Texas A&M game was a decent game midway third quarter, like 21-13. It was within a score, and Alabama then marched on to like a 22-point win. And then, of course, they played Georgia. That was their big competitive game that they should have lost. Yeah, the SEC has some catching up to do.
Well, last year, that game I think was 17-14 at halftime.
Yeah, I don't think it was 17-14 at halftime, was it?
It was. Yeah, it was.
Was it really that close? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Alabama busted open in the third quarter. But that game
very quickly.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Obviously, I mean, I don't want to be that long caller, so I'm going to let you go. But I just thought I'll throw that scenario out. So thanks for taking my call, and have a nice night, morning, whatever.
Thank you, MCD Sports 4. I appreciate it. 2:05 a.m. I need to get through this live chat to see what you guys have going on here. James Scott, USC will get to the Pac-12 championship game and win over Utah, or win prior to that over Utah to get to the championship game. NCIS Fanatics 21, 17-14 Alabama Auburn. Rashad, Texas A&M has the hardest schedule in the country. They play Clemson, Georgia, Bama. Rashad, check out South Carolina's schedule, because they play everybody you mentioned there, Clemson, Georgia, and Alabama. Plus, they play Texas A&M and Kentucky and Florida and North Carolina, who I understand is not that good, but North Carolina I expect to be competent. So South Carolina and Texas A&M schedules they're pretty close, actually, and they play each other. Deep Ara, Texas has nobody hard this year. The Gaitner backing me up on the South Carolina schedule. Big American trucker guy. I apologize for not putting the schedule up on the screen. So, hey, what was going to be my big off-season project, which should have been more like a February project, has turned into a June project with like, I bought 2 of these tripods, a new mic, crane, the whole deal. And then I've got to buy production software. Then I've got to figure out how to work all of it. And then we'll have the fancy graphics and the screen and the nice HD quality picture. You can see all my wrinkles. But that's what we'll have at that point. So, man, I should have gotten that done a long time ago, because we're going to be up against SEC Media Days in like 3 weeks. And once Media Days hits, then all bets are off until January in terms of my time and this channel and producing content and try to keep up with all of it. As you guys know, I have put myself to the test to try to keep up with all of college football. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hi, my name's Samuel.
Samuel, how are you? It's nice to have you on the show.
Good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. What's on your mind?
Now, I'm a diehard West Virginia fan, born and raised, WVU. I bleed the gold and blue.
Cool.
So, Dana Holgerson, he's gone. He went back to Houston. Him and his son crawled right back. Obviously, we got Neil Brown, a guy from Troy who led the team to great success while he was there just a couple years, coming in.
Yes, he did.
And recruiting all these young men, doing more in-state recruiting and more local recruiting, So I'm very excited for the program this year, and just to see what direction we're going to go in. We always have that Big 12 schedule. And, in the Big 12, there's some okay teams, but obviously it would be a lot better to be in the ACC or the SEC.
So, Samuel, let me ask you this. You got on the line and you immediately mentioned Dana Holgerson, and you had some disparaging comments and a bit of an inflection in your voice that leads me to believe one of two things. Either you were happy with Holgerson at West Virginia and you're awfully mad that he moved on, or number two, you didn't think he did a good job at West Virginia. So which one would it be?
Well, you know what? Holgerson had all the, power to lead this team to great success, especially last year with a man like Will Greer, David Sills, a wonderful story from, both players. He could have led that team to success. They could have done a lot better last year. I think that Holgerson's also done it in the past. He's kind of just let it down every year.
Yeah, you had to be disappointed at the conclusion of last year, because obviously with that Oklahoma game at home, you guys were, a break or two away, a turnover away from pulling that game off and playing in the Big 12 championship game. And that's what many of us anticipated was going to happen. And you lost in that crazy, 59-56 game.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was a very high-scoring game. But honestly, my favorite game from last year, I had to say, was at Texas.
Sure.
Now, I know you probably heard about this a lot. I mean, it was probably one of the best games I've watched in years.
Sure. I watched the game myself.
Because, Texas, I figured that they would be in the top 10 last year. And they very well could have been if they didn't have a couple mistakes that they had throughout the year.
They did finish in the top 10.
Team.
They did finish in the top 10.
Not usually bad.
Texas finished in the top 10.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
the Will Greer pass at the end of that game was a beautiful, beautiful throw under pressure with just seconds on the clock to be able to throw that ball over the defense with that kind of trajectory to the back of the end zone, right on the back end line, was just a phenomenal throw.
Absolutely. Very talented guy. Him and David Sills was the perfect mix. They definitely, were the perfect duo when it came to deep passing. And one of the things that made me mad whenever Will Greer was a draft prospect, they tried saying he can't throw the deep ball. I've seen this man throw the deep ball more than probably like 20 times.
Yeah, so we got our guy D-Rev Lee mentioning in the live chat, and just rating players. So I'm not a scout, I'm not a coach. They're looking for different things. I'm just talking about productivity and play and just being able to make the throws on the field at the collegiate level. Man, Will Greer, from what I understand, went to the Senior Bowl and just looked awful in workouts. but to see him in games throwing the ball and making the throws, and in terms of his football acumen and his ability to throw at different angles with velocity and with touch, he was as good as it was in college football the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm excited to see what a young guy like Neil Brown has to offer. He did some wonderful things at Troy. He produced some wonderful quarterbacks. I'm not sure, but they had a pretty good quarterback last year. I'm not sure if he was a senior or not, and I'm not sure if he got drafted. But I do know that they won whatever conference that they were in, or they did pretty well in it.
The Troy, I believe, lost the Sun Belt Championship game to App State. Let me look that one up because I'm drawing a blank. But yeah, they were like 10-3 last year. Yep, I believe I nailed the record, but I'm forgetting what happened to them in postseason play. So you were happy with the hire? You were happy with the hire?
Yes, extremely happy. When I heard about it, so far this man has just been wonderful. I mean, I don't know if you keep up with any of it on Twitter. I doubt you do. Not many people keep up unless you're a fan of WVU. But, a lot of players have transferred out of WVU since January. And, the thing was, when Neil Brown came, he told him, he said, if you're not going to get the grades, then you're not going to play. Because I guess there was a lot of, mishap under Holgerson, where Holgerson just really didn't care about the academics so much. But when Neil Brown came in, he was like, you guys are going to go to class. I'm going to make sure you go to class. And if you don't get the grades, then you're not playing.
Okay, here's the 2018 story on Troy, and if I would have thought this through, it would have come to me because I didn't remember them playing in the conference championship game, but I remember them being right there. So they played in the same side of the conference as Appalachian State. They both finished 7-1. Troy lost a head-to-head, so they didn't get to the conference championship game. So that's what finished them off 10-3. Beat Buffalo in the bowl game. Lost to App State, Liberty, and Boise State. All right, sir. We've got some other calls coming in, Samuel. I appreciate you calling for what I believe is the first time. I'm just curious, now that we know what team you root for, how long have you been watching?
I just started watching. I just came across your stream.
Okay, I appreciate it. You have a great night.
You too.
Got Samuel on the line. It always does my heart good to know that our old standbys like George, like Navy Thomas, like NCIS Fanatic 21, and many of you other ones. I don't want to leave anybody out. DeAndre are right here, but also that we've got new subscribers as we have passed the 10,600 mark in recent days. I would love to be at, what do you think, 20,000 by the end of the season? Let's get to 20,000 by Jan 1. That would be a good goal to achieve. I'm going to stay on the line for a little bit longer. I'm going to look at the live chat because there's several people I wanted to point out. And as Rashad is telling everyone here, hit that like button. So I don't know what's so magical about the like button. This all goes back to Google and YouTube analytics, that if, let's say you've got a video and you've got 5,000 views and you get like 13 people that liked it, even though you get 5,000 views, YouTube is telling itself that, well, the video wasn't that well received, versus you got 5,000 views and you got 2,000 likes. Well, they're going to put that out in the traffic stream more, and more people are going to get a chance to watch it. Similarly, if you've got a video where it's 10 minutes long and the average view length was 13 seconds, that's why clickbait has not worked as recent as it did in the past, because it's just not calculated in terms of the YouTube algorithms on number of views. It's based on watch time. Fortunately, thanks to you, my watch time is very high. So like 40 or 50% of the audience stays for like half the video. So that's a very high rate. Most people click off of the video within 15 or 20 seconds. But for my typical 10-minute video, I've got half the audience there after 5-6 minutes. So thank you for sticking with the videos, because that helps as well when YouTube can calculate, okay, you got this person got 10,000 views, but nobody stuck around for the video. They just clicked in and then out because they liked the thumbnail and the title and tags, but there was nothing there, nothing of substance, versus this video only got 2,000 views, but people stuck around for half the video on average. That means a lot of people stuck around for the entire thing. So that's another algorithm. So again, to make a long story short, as I made a short story long there, Rashad is letting everyone know, please hit the like button. If you don't have to agree with me, of course, this is why we're here, because I don't know everything. And of course, most of this is up for debate. It's not factual. We have facts to go by, but once we create an argument, everybody has their own perspective. I think mine's fairly well educated, and I do my research and my homework, and I've been watching football and covering it and working in the TV industry and the sports industry at a high level for a long time. So I think I've got something to say, but I don't have all the answers, and my perspective is not perfect. I just think it's valuable, just like yours is. So we put it all together, and I believe I'm the voice of college football. Much of this is because of you. You have your voice, and together we are the voice of college football. So hit the like button is what it comes down to. Please hit the like button. If you have anything to comment on in any of the videos, please do so. And share the videos out there on social media, and let your friends know that we are here to get you set for 2019. All right. Vodka Drinker, we appreciate the comments. And Vodka Drinker, I failed to thank you for the contribution. So thank you so much. Swampy McGee, Vodka Drinker, DeAndre tonight contributing to the channel. So in short, you know, this is something I love to do, but it's still work. So it's a combination. You can love to do your work, but it's still work, but I love to do it. Would I do it if I didn't get paid? Well, absolutely. I've been doing it for years without getting paid, but the goal is to build the channel to the point where instead of every time you guys are suggesting, hey, Mark, why don't you do this or do that? Or why don't you do an LSU live stream, weekly live stream, or Clemson weekly live stream? Well, because I'm pouring about 45 or 50 hours into this in addition to the full-time job. So there is a grand vision here. And believe me, despite all the content that you see me pumping out day to day, I'm actually spending in recent days as much or maybe more work on the behind the scenes marketing and sales, gearing up to bring and deliver a big punch and try to make this thing viable. So you can help that out. And again, just ask yourself the question, is this valuable? Is this quality? Then I'm going to appreciate it in these ways in which I can. And when somebody throws a few bucks at me, that may seem insignificant to a certain extent, and it's not. In no way is that insignificant, because those are your hard-earned dollars, and what you're basically telling me is that this is worth your contribution. I don't know your particular situation, but based on the amount of money that most of us make, every dollar means something. But at the same time, what is $2 going to be to you? Most likely, you're not going to miss that $2. And if you do miss that $2, I am not in any way wanting to offend you, because, again, the cash flow is different for all of us. But most likely, most of us aren't going to miss $2. Now, we don't want to part with $2, and I totally understand that. I'm the same way. But if you see value in it and you part with that $2, think about if everybody did their part. No, this is how multiplication works, is that if everybody did a little bit that they wouldn't miss, then that contributes to what we're trying to build here. And you put all that together, you put the 10,000 together, and then this can be so much better than it is now. All right. Jeremiah Martinez, Diaz definitely not on the hot seat after this year for not winning the Coastal. I would agree. Unless things are just a mess, a disaster coming off the rails for Manny Diaz, even 7-5, they're going to be like, okay, this was disappointing, but we're fine. He just started. He's a young coach. He's a Miami guy. Let's keep this thing going. I hope I pronounced this correctly because it obviously has a connection to the Gators. The Gaitner, the Gate to Nor, the Gate to Nor. Thank you so much for the contribution. Go Gators. And for example, these kind of contributions, what this will do, in addition to compensating me, again, the price tag on the purchases I just made to upgrade the quality of the production was upwards of $1,600 and will be more. But it's my intent, and I really need to follow through on my credential request, which I made about a month ago. But even if I don't get the credentials to the game, we are going to make our first Mark Rogers TV Voice of College Football trip to a game, and it's going to be Florida versus Miami. I am headed down to Orlando for the game. So hopefully I will see and meet many of you, and we can have a good time. And I hope to bring back a lot of interesting footage with fans at the game, depending on the credential situation, players, coaches. It depends on what the access is. And if it's not any access, then it's going to be an off-season viewing part or an off-campus, off-stadium, off-site viewing party type of deal. So I appreciate the contribution there. As soon as that game got moved to week 0, I thought, okay, there's my opportunity to go focus on one game and not miss all the other games. So when Miami and Florida were playing up against Auburn and Oregon and all the other big games in week 1, I thought, what I typically do for those of you who have yet to experience a football season with the Voice of College Football, we go full throttle on Saturdays. It's from like 10 in the morning all the way all day, crashing in with live streams, analyzing games, coming in, near the end of the noon games, analyzing the last couple of drives of the noon games, leading into the 3:30 games and prepping you for the 3:30 games, and then getting offline and letting you watch the 3:30 games. And then we jump on board when it's 20-20 with 5 minutes left, and we do the analysis all day and hear from you. And it's a whole lot of fun. It's a little bleary-eyed by the time it hits like 2 a.m., but it's a whole lot of fun. So I didn't want to miss that. But once the Miami-Florida game got moved to week 0, I felt fairly comfortable that you would give me a pass on missing the Arizona-Hawaii game. That's a risk I'm taking, missing the analysis of the Arizona-Hawaii game in favor of Miami and Florida, so that I can be right there watching the game. Hey, Cheryl, how you doing tonight? Good to see you. D. Rev Lee, I would have rather had Cristobal, but Diaz has surprised me so far. He's done well. D. Barat, Kansas, Kentucky, UNC, Duke, Gonzaga, or the college basketball blue bloods. Okay. We don't talk college basketball here, but I think that's a bit of a flawed list, but it's close. May want to take out Gonzaga, put in Indiana or UCLA. Nona, my apologies on disrespecting Arizona. Of course, Arizona and Hawaii. Vodka Drinker, thank you so much for the contribution. I greatly appreciate the second contribution there, Vodka Drinker. Mark, you need to do a fan experience for that game. Record a lot of stuff, put us by your side. So that's my aim here, is to figure out all my camera paraphernalia and the best way to record, go live, do all those things while I'm down there. I'm not going to be down there for long. Maybe it's I don't know when the game is. Maybe it's a 3:30 game. Maybe it's a late night game. I would think, it being the only game on that Saturday, it's got to be a primetime game. So I'll probably take an early morning flight, get down there, talk to fans, talk to all of you, find my bearings, and then get as much footage as possible, and then get the heck out of there sometime late that night or probably the next morning. All right. And so, deeper out, my point on Indiana, UCLA, when you use the term blue blood, is long term, they are much greater than Gonzaga. There's no comparison. I understand Gonzaga is much better than Indiana and UCLA right now. Okay. Anyway, back to football. Nona, show us your fan side Mr. Rogers. No D, Nona. No D. All right. This is probably a chore for NCIS Fanatic 21 because he's usually able to come up with these situations and respond with a link. He would be able to find my one fan video that I shot. I don't know when this was, maybe 3 to 4 months ago, maybe longer than that. Maybe it was last summer. I shot a bit of a fanboy video, and it was rather humorous, and people took to it pretty well. So if you could find that link, I don't remember what I called it, but you would get a bit of a feel for me on that one. Okay. D. Rev Lee, who do you think wins the Miami quarterback battle? I believe that N'Kosi Perry has an inside track based on his experience last year, even though a lot of people aren't happy with how he performed. I think you have to take into consideration his lack of experience in the play calling issues and the not so much just the play calling, but the concepts of the offense last year. That there was an issue with the offense that hamstrung N'Kosi Perry. He seems to have the best combination of throwing skills and mobility. Tate Martell has issues in the passing game, from what I understand. We didn't see enough of Tate Martell at Ohio State when it meant anything. And of course, we've seen nothing of Jaron Williams on the field when it matters. We've seen him in the spring game and otherwise. So that's where I stand on that right now, is that that's a N'Kosi Perry. I'm going to lay the odds, D. Rev Lee, at I'm going to say N'Kosi Perry 50% chance, Tate Martell 30, and Jaron Williams 20. And we would probably see a different approach to this quarterback battle and the decision made by Manny Diaz if they had a warm-up game or two that led them into the most difficult Power 5 game. But since they get hit with Florida right out of the gate, I believe that they will need to make a decision and not say, you know what, we're going to see how it plays out. Martell's going to start, but Williams and Perry are going to get some time. I don't see that being the type of decision that they will make. I think that they will be convicted and feel as though that they need to, for the sake of the offense and the leadership component, to name a starter and stick with him. Deeper Rod at one point was dominating the discussion. James Scott, you were the voice of college football. As you channel is a platform in which we junkies gravitate towards. Thank you so much, James. I appreciate your support and that you encourage. I see a number of times on here, James, where you have encouraged others to like the channel. Thank you. What else do we have? What do we have here? We've got Chris Brocious. Now, Chris, you are the one person in the chat that I do not recognize your handle. And we've got a long-standing tradition here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, to welcome you to the channel. Chris Brocious. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Would love to know who you root for, how long you've been watching. Leave those comments in the live chat or to the comment section of any video. Anything else here? I probably missed a bunch of stuff. So if you guys have any comments, meaning questions or comments that you want to leave to make sure that I don't miss them, leave them to any of the videos. So just grab any video, leave the comment, and I review the comments. And of course, over at, you see the link below, the Voice of College Football community, I once a week respond to the comments. Most of the Big 12 can actually play defense. The offense is just so superior, it makes it seem like there's no defense in the Big 12. So, D. Rev Lee, that would be an interesting project to go through the Big 12's games out of conference against quality competition and see how they performed, because you might have a point there. To take the out of conference games. So in Oklahoma, Alabama, of course, you're going to the top of the chain when you mention that. Oklahoma's other non-conference game was against UCLA. They blew them out. They almost lost to Army. Defensively, though, they gave up 4 touchdowns, 28 points in that game against Army. They held down UCLA, which the Bruins were a train wreck to start the season. Texas out of conference, of course, lost to Maryland. They gave up 34 points, so that's not necessarily a good showing there, but not awful. Ohio State gave up 51 to Maryland. Texas out of conference, of course, played very well against Georgia. Then we had TCU giving up 40 to Ohio State. There's no shame in that. They held Cal down to 6 points in an ugly Cheez-It Bowl that I think was 7-6 or 10-7 in overtime, I believe. So they only gave up a touchdown there. Iowa State's been very good on defense in recent years, and they played a really good bowl game against Washington State, only lost by 2 points, gave up 28 to Washington State, who usually scores more like 35 to 40 to 45 points. So off the top of my head, Rev Lee, I believe you've got a decent point there about our criticism of Big 12 defenses. And certainly at times I have been that person as well to say, yeah, the Big 12 plays flag football. I used to say that about the Pac-12 a long time ago, and that criticism has generally shifted to the Big 12 in recent years. But you might have a point there. I do think that there was a spot there around 2013, 14, 15 in which the Big 12 kind of bottomed out. And it's come back a little bit with the help of TCU, with the help of Texas greatly in the last 2 years. Iowa State being much better, of course, Oklahoma State being decent pretty much for the last 10 to 12 years under Mike Gundy. And of course, Oklahoma, for as good as Bob Stoops was and as good as the program was, Lincoln Riley making it even better to not win a college football playoff game, but to participate well last year for the most part, even though Alabama had that game in hand. But the year before, to take Georgia to the wire, to overtime, and then Georgia to turn around and outplay Alabama, that said a lot for Oklahoma. So the Big 12 has not been a laughing stock in recent years. They have been very respectable. I do not think that the conference is as good as the SEC. I know that they won 3 of 4 bowl games against the SEC, but then people who throw that statistic out disregard the games that were played in the regular season. So if you take the totality of the games played between the Big 12 and the SEC, I don't remember the count. I could go through it in my head, but when we just take the bowl games, yeah, it was 3-1 Big 12, and I know you can, as a Big 12 fan, puff up your chest and yeah, and they were very good wins for the Big 12. When you talk about Texas as the 2 seed, the championship game loser taking on another championship game loser, so it's a fair fight, an even seeded game, and they beat Georgia, a very good team head to head, quality win for the Big 12, of course, and Missouri and Oklahoma State and the Cowboys winning that game as a 6-6 team out of the Big 12, beating a 7-5 SEC team, or maybe Missouri was 8-4. I believe they were 7-5 off the top of my head. Yeah, I think they were 8-4. Anyway, Oklahoma State won the game as a 10-point underdog. What were the other non-conference or the other SEC Big 12 matchups in bowl play? Of course, Alabama beat Oklahoma. Then the other game was, I'm missing another game in there. Kentucky, no. Florida. Texas A&M, no. LSU, no. So anyway, and then of course West Virginia played Tennessee, but that's not a fair matchup. Oh, Vanderbilt and Baylor, that was the other Big 12 win. So that was a really good game. Baylor won, feather in the cap for the Big 12. All right. So good point by D. Rev Lee. I do think that the recruiting rankings and then 3 to 4 years later, the NFL draft status of these conferences is very telling, and the Big 12 has not fared well in either category in recent years. The recruiting has been fairly awful past the Big Two, and you don't see that in any other conference. You go 8, 9 spots deep, even beyond that in the SEC, and shoot, the recruiting is crazy. It's so good. In the Big Ten, even past Ohio State and Michigan, Penn State's a major recruiter. Nebraska's becoming one. Michigan State's decent. Wisconsin's decent. That's about it. The ACC obviously has 3 schools that are pretty elite in recruiting. So the Big 12, yeah, it drops off considerably really after Texas and Oklahoma, who recruits well in the Big 12. Who's anywhere close to the top 25? Really nobody. And then at the NFL draft, we've seen the Big 12 not perform at the NFL draft. So I think that says a lot for the talent. So if anything, maybe the coaching's better in the Big 12 to be able to make up for that and be competitive in the big non-conference games across the country the last couple of years, where for a couple of years there, they were not competitive. They've been competitive. I still think it's probably the third or fourth best conference in America. SEC, Big Ten. I am confident of those 2 rankings. Then it gets a bit muddy. I probably go Big 12, Pac-12, ACC. We'll see if Miami and Florida State can come back. If they become 9-3, 10-2 kind of teams, that's what the ACC needs. And in a sense, you say, what's it matter who wins the games within the conference, because the conference always finishes 500. But to develop what is a good look for a conference is not to have what Alabama's been in the SEC for the last few years, when it's been Alabama, and especially before Georgia emerged the last 2 years. Then it was just this glut of like Mississippi State, LSU, 8-4 teams. 3 or 4 of those that didn't come anywhere close to challenging Alabama. So you had arguably the number 1 team in the country. Then you had a bunch of like top 15 to 20 teams. That's not a good place to be, nor is it good to be like a Pac-12 where they don't really, outside of Oregon State and maybe Colorado, have any awful teams, but they've got a lot of like 40th ranked teams. Arizona State, Arizona, Utah, Washington State was better last year, of course, but a lot of teams like that. UCLA in other years. Really, the Big Ten, the perception of the Big Ten was raised when they had a national championship contender clearly in Ohio State, but then they also had Michigan and Penn State and Wisconsin and Michigan State always ranking in the top 10 to 15 in the country. And there's that, because if it's maybe not fair, but nobody's looking at Illinois and Rutgers, and they're not looking at Kansas for the most part, and Oregon State, and the teams that are really inconsequential. They're looking at how good is the top half of the league. And for the better part of the last 6 to 7 years, the Big Ten has been very good at that place. Now, the Purdue's decent now over the last 2 years, but prior to that, awful. Illinois, awful. Rutgers, awful. Minnesota was awful in different spots, but basically those 3 schools. So the Big Ten has had the worst bottom layer for much of that time, but nobody seems to care because nobody's paying attention to that. All right. All right. I don't know if there's anything else that we need to go through here. If I've missed anything, again, just leave the comments in the comment section of any of the videos. Thank you so much for joining. It is 2:41 a.m. and Yeah, I'm probably not going to go to sleep, but I've got so much to work on in addition to the content that you see on a regular basis. Consider that we are pumping out position previews like nobody's business. I think I've posted more than 80 position previews, and we did more today. So they'll be out. My schedule rankings continue with number 24 tomorrow, and 23 and 21 and 20. I'm up to about 19 that I've recorded. And let's see. Hang on just a second. I jotted all this down for a reason. Amazon. Grab the Amazon link. Voice of College Football Community. In the description section below, the Voice of College Football Community with an exclusive live stream where I respond to your comments. And number 2, where I bring you on to talk college football. Audio. If you like the audio, or anybody out there loves the audio instead of the video, Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify. Schedule rankings continue, record projections, 2019 week-to-week predictions. Okay, I got to get rolling on this. So if you missed the video, we are going to take your votes on the 2019 season. We're going to run through the schedule week to week to week to week. I released a video with the week 0 and week 1 games, and I'm taking your votes. And basically, you are going to predict all the games in the Power 5 and the key group of 5 games. I'm going to tally up those votes, and we're going to keep the standings, and you are going to predict what's going to happen this year. Position previews, I just mentioned. Season previews, I got to get on that quick. And we're also going to be starting our series of conference top 5 lists. ACC top 5 quarterbacks, ACC top 5 running backs to be produced this Wednesday. Here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, we will see all of you very soon. Thank you so much for the contribution and the support. I greatly appreciate it. We will see you next time.